Well, good evening, everybody. It is September 17th, 2024, 5:30 p.m. And this is the City Council work session for the City of Edina. We're gathered in the community room, and we've got many of our directors here with us as well as we talk about the 2025 to 2030 CIP and 2025 proposed budget. And first of all, before we get to that work, I'm going to ask our clerk, Sharon Ellison, to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew. Here. Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Risser.
Here.
Mayor Huntley.
Here. And then I will turn to Scott Neal to kind of set the stage, and Pa Tao, our finance director, is with us as well, and prepared to work on further budget matters here this evening. Thank you.
Okay. To start tonight, I'm going to take you back in time to April of 2023. That was the first time that you as a city council got a chance to meet in a retreat format, and a lot of staff were there that day as well. That really was the start of our budget making process for this particular cycle, right? It was an odd numbered year, 2023, so that meant that we were working really on our operating budgets, our 2-year operating budgets, one budget for 2024 and the other budget for 2025. As we moved forward in that year to the kind of the time frame that we are in now, we are working at getting our budgets together on the operating side, projecting our budgets, our spending and our taxing levels for the upcoming 2 years. And when we got to December of 2023, we presented a budget option to you, and the council endorsed that budget, and we moved forward from there. And that is really what we did for our operating budget for the year that we are going into, 2025. That's when we had the last real thorough look at it and discussion around it. So we're taking that budget as our base. What we typically do in the even numbered years of that cycle for operating budgets is we don't spend a lot of time on those big decisions around staffing and service levels, et cetera. We spend our time on the capital side, and we're going to talk about those tonight. But we spend a lot of our effort then just fine-tuning and making sure the numbers are the same precision-wise, right? And that's where we are today. We're going to talk about the 2025 budget taxing spending decisions, but really we spent most of our time this year looking at CIP, and so I think we're going to lead with that and have a lot of people here that are available to answer questions. So I'll turn it over to Pa, and she can lead us through her first budget presentation. Pa.
Good evening, Councilmember and Mayor. So thank you, Scott, for that recap. Did it go? It did not go. It went now. Okay. So like Scott mentioned, tonight here is our work session. We met last time in August. We presented our recommendation, and then we sent a follow-up email to you all as far as are there any suggestions or feedbacks as we prepare for tonight's council work session, right? And so tonight, after our work session, I will also add to what Scott said. We are hoping that council would adopt a preliminary levy as well as a consideration for the final draft of the 2025-2030 CIP. And then, of course, throughout the rest of the year, in December, on December 3rd, we'll be doing our public hearing and final adoption of the CIP as well as our 25 levy. With this being said, depicted here is our 2024 adopted budget, which was adopted in conjunction with the middle section you see up there of the tentatively approved 25 budget in December of 2023. What staff are recommending is our 13.14% increase in comparison to 2024. This is slightly lower than what was originally tentatively approved in December of 23. This is again due to slightly better interest rates coming back from the bond issuance. Of this, 13.14%, 5.46% is attributed to the Fire Station 2 and the public safety additional staffing.
Can you, now the $2 million that was used to reduce the budget, and then is it 1 million
It's 2 million in 2024, and that was from the budget surplus, and then
Okay.
1 million is used in the 25.
Okay,
And that is still in the proposed or staff recommended.
okay. It confused me
Yeah.
because I didn't see that.
Yeah, you won't see
Okay.
that, but it's kind of blended into that top line, the general fund number.
Okay.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention that we have a lot of stuff to go through with you all tonight. So then we do have a time for questions and comments at the end that I would prefer for us to hold to questions to the end. I just want to make sure we get through all of our slides. And so when you ask what makes up that 13.14%, you also have this in a handout in front of you for better visualization as far as what attributes to that increase, which is a 7.1 million or 7,148,589 increase from 2024. This will then bring to you all the items that's listed on the far left. The middle percentage is then your total in terms of percentage of the increase. This, in addition, also funds those positions listed on the bottom here, where we get a half FTE for the Park and Rec program facility coordinator, and then we also fund 3 additional police staffing and 6 additional firefighter and paramedic staffing that we have committed to with our previous adoption of 24's budget. And then on the other side of the chart is just a different visualization in terms of the different chunks that makes up that levy increase for 25. Last time we met, council asked what service what service is city able to provide at this level of levy increase for 25. Therefore, what I want to show you is that the service level in terms of support, just as in terms of just general levy support, supporting departments depend on about 16%, and then our operating departments depends on 84% of this levy dollar for the general fund. This again doesn't include all the debt service payments, all the capital needs. This is generally just for general operation. This is another way of looking at what those departments are in terms of functions and breakdown in percentages. I won't go through it, but again, just a different way of looking at it, breaking it by this different departments. Keeping in mind that this is not proportionate to the total operating budget, more so just for what is supported by the general levy. You'll see a slide later on in terms of what does the whole budget encompass. In terms of police department, they are dependent on the general levy by 28%. This will entail them to provide all those services that's listed here, in addition to additional service that's listed out in the bubble. Anything that's green, I want to call out that this is unique to the city of Edina, that residents are paying for, that no other city may offer, that only city of Edina has. The next one is fire department. They depend on 15% of the general fund levy. Of course, this also brings out to public special services that Edina provides. It's from public health to ALS to the different rental inspection and fire services. Next one is Park and Rec Department. They depend on 13% of this general fund levy. And of course, this is to provide park administration, to recreation, to all those other additional services that are highlighted in green. And of course, we have to consider that these are enterprises, but then it's also part in terms of services that the city is able to provide. Public Works Department depends on 13% of this general fund levy in providing sidewalk, bridges maintenance, to snow removal, street maintenance and repairs, to your Public Works admin and general maintenance. Engineering depends on 13% of the general fund levy. This goes towards your general engineering services to HVAC, electrical, sustainability, facilities, to name a few. Community development is another department that's supported needs support about 4% of the general fund levy. This is from planning, assessing, to affordable housing and zoning. Administrative also depends on general fund levy in terms of the operation side of admin. This is for the city clerk, city council, and the equity division, as well as the elections. Other support departments such as IT, HR, finance, communication, and other components of admin also relies on this general fund levy by about 16% to provide those different support services to the operating departments. Another question that we got from council since at the last work session was, what is the tech cost in terms of over the last couple of years? What have we been seeing in terms of changes and increases? So what I have here is just some time slots since 2014. IT budget has significantly increased along with devices that IT have to support with adding on additional IT staff. I want to also call out that licenses, and particularly Microsoft, has also increased significantly since 2019, if not 2014, as well as security support, right? One thing that we don't have depicted up here or called out separately is like your software support for different entities. So to name one, it would be like our financial system. That will be another big component of the IT's budget coming into each of those years, and they have that within the IT budget. Now, when you say, so that is in terms of support to the general fund support, what does that mean? But then the next step is I'll be going into what does the 2025 levy support in terms of capital project. So previously, staff presented this to council as far as on-demand maintenance needs, right? So as of 2023, there was $46.2 million of on-demand maintenance that still needs to be worked on. Council asked how much of the local option sales tax projects will be chipping away at that number. And so with that, the only lost project or local option sales tax project that is part of deferred maintenance is our Braemar Ice Arena project. This would chip away at about a $13.1 million of the 23 balance of $46.2 million. All the other projects are not part of this deferred maintenance project plan, therefore they're not called out. But then taking into the Braemar Ice Arena, this would chip away and leave us with a $33.9 million outstanding balance on deferred maintenance. The next couple of slides are going to be similar to this one, but you also have it in front of you in the packet that I provided, projects by funding source. What I want to call out to your attention is that we previously showed you these slides and also provided to you in a packet to request for feedback or recommendations for us to make revisions or consider. We did not get any comments in terms of CIP projects that will be dependent on the CIP levy. However, staff is still recommending that in 25, a levy of the CIP levy of $1.9 million with incremental increases over the next couple of years that you can look in the packet with you that you have. And then 27, 28, 29, and 30. And I know we did get a suggestion from Councilmember Carolyn that for the golf clubhouse. And so you'll see that in another slide, as that is a project that's too big and the bulk of a CIP levy. So we are considering it for a different financing tool to finance that project. But a little history of where the CIP levy was and where staff is recommending for the future of this CIP levy. Previously in 2014, I've mentioned this before, we had a zero levy for the CIP needs. It was more so funded through our operation levy. And recognizing that there is CIP needs to maintain or keep up with our maintenance need and project needs of the city, we've been slowly, incrementally increasing it over the time of the last decade. With recommendation for 2025 and outward to continue increasing this number. As you saw, there was a crucial amount of deferred maintenance we need to keep up with. Therefore, as you can see in 25, we did lower it a bit by $100,000 for 2025 as the annual levy since 21 was at 2 million. However, we moved that $100,000 difference to the operating. This is more so that we can line it up with the comp plan being funded through operating rather than the CIP levy. So here are a list of projects, and as you can see up there, Caroline, I included the golf clubhouse and event center, which is a 27 million project item. We took that into consideration. The only addition I added was that one. All the other projects are still the same as I last presented to you at the last work session. The earliest that we can do or consider the golf clubhouse event center project is in 2029. This, of course, will give staff the opportunity to start designing and planning for it in as early as 27, 28. This is in consideration of staff capacity and other existing projects happening at the same time. When we talk about bonding, I want to give you guys the full picture in terms of what debt service will look like in terms of the next couple of years, right? And so as we are projecting here, as existing debt falls off, there is an opportunity for us to continue with our maintenance of existing projects to add on additional debt. So as you can see, that golf course events clubhouse is added on in 29 and 30. And then the other one existing right now as the gymnasium debt will be falling off at the end of this year.
If you go back to that slide again, and so what's falling off in 2020? What's falling off this year?
This year will be our last payment at the end of this year, 24. There's nothing falling off in 24.
Okay, 25.
And 25 will be the last payment on the gymnasium with the add of the new fire station to debt. Or as I called out there, the Community Health and Safety Center.
Okay.
So depending on how you want to describe falling off, the gym's payment we pay in 25, it falls off in 26.
Correct. Another way to look at it is what is our financial management projections looking like in the next couple of years. Of course, with our recommendation of increasing the CIP levy, I have it highlighted starting in 27 through 2030, and then with us bringing on that additional debt in 29 and 30 for more so for the golf clubhouse in 29 through 30. We're looking at the bottom line in terms of property tax levy increase year over year. So once again, what does the, tonight more so, I want to focus us on year 2025, right? Knowing where the future is for 26 through 2030, we still have some times in terms of having these productive conversations, but then tonight more so is on the focus of year 25. What makes up that 13.14% increase in year 2025? It has to do with us, our commitment in previous year to the fire, to public safety expansion in providing additional positions with our debt service to the fire station, as well as other existing operation costs that we have to account for. So that's listed there.
So public safety expansion really is the big thing that's driving our 13% levy increase for the upcoming year. The public safety, it's important, I think, to remember that we had a lot of discussions in, like I said, in April of 23 at our retreat, and that was at a time when people were reacting to changes in public safety, right? And those changes were coming up through the public. They come to you, you voice them to us, and this has been our response, has been to design a hiring process for more police officers, a new fire station, and new firefighters to be in the new fire station. That's where that comes from. And I think it's important to know that that's where that comes from. So that's what we're looking at here. Police and fire make up about 43% of our general fund budget. And so that's probably our bigger driver. If you look at the rest of our spending in our general fund, 7.5% is pretty close to what we see a lot of our peer cities doing as well. They're all in that, most of them are kind of in that range.
7%. Say that again. I didn't understand what you said.
Most of our, if you take out the kind of the focused public safety spending that we're doing with expansions, both in service levels and facilities, that leaves us with, if you 13 minus 5.5 is a 7.5-ish.
You're talking about the increase.
Yeah, rate of increase.
I didn't know what 7% was of.
Yeah, 7%
Okay,
it's the increase in our general fund levy of 7% compared to our kind of our neighboring cities. And so I just talked about this as well. This is how we have trying to take what we hear from residents through you and push it into our system, our budget system, and produces this kind of result. The base increase, I also wanted to point to the half FTE in our Parks and Rec. That's also related to kind of public safety issues that we were identifying at that time. And that's important, I think, to know that's not a half-time position, it's a full-time position. Half of it's funded out of the general fund levy, half of it from enterprise and enterprise revenues. You know, our alternatives in terms of what's available to you today, it's important to recognize that we need to adopt, we need the council to adopt a preliminary levy today. The statutory deadline to do that is September 30th. If we don't adopt a new preliminary levy, the current preliminary levy is what moves forward, so no increase in levy. We have some increase that we need for certainly for debt service and for other commitments that we've made. My recommendation to you is to move forward with the proposal tonight. But moving forward with the proposal kind of affirms that we have a process and that we follow the process. It provides for kind of internal stability, so people that work for the city have been thinking about this, the budget for this year and the budget for next year, have been preparing to execute the council's direction in that regard. And it also keeps our previous commitments that we've made to each other, from us to the council, from the council to the community. Planning, we can plan for alternative budgets, though. We can look at reduction strategies, but if we were going to do that, the first thing we would want to do is have some discussion with council members to see what your ideas are in terms of different levy levels. We would want to have some discussion with employees and community engagement because they were expecting something and we would be possibly changing it. And in terms of the timeline, we would have to, this is something, if we were going to change, make a significant change from what we're proposing, we would really have to get on it like right away and probably not do some stuff that we were planning on doing for the fall, because we'd have to have it completed by November 27th in order to be in order to be ready for the public hearing, which has already been scheduled for December 3rd. The other thing that we have to kind of keep in mind too is that we have a deadline from Hennepin County about when we have to provide them with the flyer that talks about our budget for the upcoming year. That goes into the TNT notice that residents receive, and the deadline for them to get that is.
They have to get it by September 30th.
At the last day.
Hennepin County has to receive it by September 30th to make sure that it's included in the October.
But in order for them to get it on September 30th, we got to know what's in it. We got to know what's in it in order to write it. So
typically it includes, the drivers of the budget, information on when the public hearing will be, and comparisons.
yeah. So our recommendation to you tonight is to move forward with the proposed levy increase for 2025. And certify that later in the meeting tonight. We'll continue to refine our budget for adoption. There are some things probably in here that we could bring that down a little bit, and then have the public hearing for the 2025 budget and levy on December 3rd.
Question?
So overall, I really like this breakdown of the levy increases. I think that this is a really helpful asset. Because where my mind goes, right, 13.14% is very large. And I know that we've talked previously about how do we tell that story, and I think, you know, yes, we can say the 5.46% is because of the public safety expansion. I think that's really important. But there's also the base increases, and I'm curious if we know, if we have any historical information about how much of this is related to inflation. I see that as being one of those, but I consider market adjustments and healthcare changes and all those things as being related to our overall current economy. And so as we then are doing the, 5-year, 10-year forecast, I get really nervous seeing high numbers year after year. And I want to understand how much of this high number this year is because of the current state of the economy and the state of inflation, and are we assuming similar rates for that outlook, or, right, I think they're talking about potentially interest rates coming down. How much of that could impact the year-over-year increases? Because there's a story around why it's high this year, but there's not a story for why it would be sustained at that rate over years to come.
I can answer the part about known factors. So we do factor into our future out years what CPI is, right? And so that is at a rate of 3%, just adjusting for consumer price index. Other factors we know now in today's is that there's a 9.1% increase in our healthcare costs. That's another component that we have to factor in when we're talking about base increases for 25. Anything else I'm missing?
Yeah, I'll just say that it might be 3% this year, but if you look at previous years and last couple, and the way that local government tends to work is that we have contracts, right? So we're kind of, it takes a little bit for us to be hit by some of those increases that we see coming forward. We did in the assumptions that we put together for that FMP forecast. It is conservative. I would rather be slightly conservative in what we're projecting and be able to deliver you good news about, hey, the number went down, than be on the other side of delivering you news of, hey, we didn't calculate enough. But there is a world that we could live in where inflation could be worse than what we're expecting, and we might have to bring that to you. But we did try to assume what we thought was responsible for an outlook that's looking out 6 years. I mean, there's a lot of factors that will play into that, including construction costs, shortages of product, stuff like that comes into play that could impact it one way or the other.
So are we feeling the still high inflation rates disproportionately this year and last year? Or is the numbers in here reflective of a very average kind of year of increases that we see as a city?
I think that we're higher in terms of health insurance anyway, being one of the biggest drivers when you look at that number at a 9.1 compared to what it's been previous years. So it depends if our bands change. It gets really complicated. Do you have anything to add there? You're good.
I don't. Luckily, we're on the lower end of our comparable cities. I know some other cities are much higher. But yeah, it is complicated. Unfortunately, healthcare is not decreasing in costs. So you think of pharmacy, you think of, supplies, it's just something down, that's for sure. And it hasn't been going down for years. But we do look at experience rating and things like, there's just a lot that plays into it.
Chad, do you have anything to add about, product, what you're seeing from a street construction, that type of side of things, or things?
We're starting to see it start to be more normal, but at the beginning of the year it was still high. People are catching up for materials and supplies and stuff like that. So I think it's starting to adjust, so we should see that probably next year with our bids.
Our health insurance, we are a member of the Logis Health Insurance Pool, so we're in a pool with other city governments, so it's not a private sector health insurance company.
Which is a good thing. Some of the cities are seeing almost a 30% healthcare increase, and we only saw 9%, so that's a really good deal for us.
Well, I love this question. Thank you. And I like the last 3 slides, by the way.
Thanks. His idea was,
but I think it gives us a huge opportunity at some point. So we just have to decide if we want to do it, to show the other side of that, which is getting out of the position of saying, here's what it is. Yes, it's high. It is what it is. That's kind of what we just did, right? And that's fair. Here are some things that are impacting it. That's fair too. We typically do that. The next spin on that is having some kind of commentary that says healthcare is 9% increase. It's lower than our comparable cities. And here's the 3 things we do to try and manage that so that our increase isn't a hockey stick. It's, you know, it's kind of follows inflation or whatever. And so I don't know what we do, but I'm sure we do something. And so being able to tell that story then says, yeah, it's high, but you can trust us. We understand we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure we're not spending more than we need to. And in this area, here's how we do that.
the mayor and I were visiting earlier today and talking about how do we start building our budget for the city? Do we start with seeing how much money we have to spend and then figure out a way to spend it? Or what we really do is we talk to you in our retreat, we get a sense of what you'd like to accomplish in the community, we build kind of service levels or models of service levels, and then we put a price on that, right? Are we gonna use contractors or consultants, or are we gonna use employees, and what are they gonna cost us? What is the equipment gonna cost? Where are we gonna put them? We kind of build the expense side. Then we test that against the revenue side to see how intolerable the levy or the user fees have to be in order to support that kind of program of service. So that's how we build. We build it from the expense side to the revenue side and then present both to you.
So, I have a bunch of questions. First of all, when I suggested the golf house, I didn't know that meant starting to plan now to build it. And so I would recommend taking that off the CIP. I don't want to spend staff dollars right now. I thought of it as a placeholder. We also have a third fire station that we've been talking about. I'd like to see, I know we only go out 5 years, but it needs to be in the consciousness of what we're doing, both of those projects. I don't want to spend staff dollars right now planning the golf house. I know it's out there, it's a need, and I think what I'm trying to avoid is this surprise. Oh, guess what? The building is really in crummy shape. Why didn't you tell us that? Why wasn't it on the CIP kind of thing? So I don't know if there's a longer term CIP that's out there or unfunded sort of things. And so that's really what I had in mind with the golf house, the golf building, but also with the third fire station. I want that noted because we know those are both things that are out there. I'm very concerned about how the hockey rink just never ever got on the CIP and fell farther and farther behind, and I want to avoid that. So that goes to the CIP. I have some real just specific questions, and so one is for Perry, Director Vetter.
Sorry.
The story that I remember is that we have playground equipment that can no longer be repaired because the parts aren't made. And so we have this levy for parks, and that's, to me, kind of a one-time surprise that came up. What we do with equipment is we keep repairing it until it's really beyond its repairable life. But there was a cliff where we were repairing, and then we couldn't. Can you confirm that for me or tell the story of that?
Absolutely, Councilmember Jackson. And I can't speak before my arrival, right? But when I arrived, that was one of kind of the evaluation criteria that we looked at. And what was kind of discovered was a lot of those playgrounds were approaching the 20+ year mark. A good rule of thumb is replacement around that 13 to 15 16-year timeframe.
Okay.
So what the special park improvement levy is, one, replacing playgrounds. And they are replacements, right? They're typical size, typical scope and scale, and amenities for within that park. And it's also going to be replacing the 5 worst park shelters that we have. My understanding is it is part of the general fund levy, but dedicated to those 2 uses. So I would say at the end of that cycle, that would be a discussion point with the council to say, do you want to continue on this path of replacing around that recommended 13 to 16-year time frame? But we will get through all of them, and then we'll have that opportunity to have that discussion. So we'll be on track, we'll be caught up, and then we can have the discussion on how do we want to handle in the future. And that's kind of that long-term vision of staff would recommend keep going, right? So we don't get in that position again.
Okay. And then, so am I telling the story correctly when I say that?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
We still
You-
have
you
wooden
put it so
playgrounds. We still have
diplomatically.
wooden playgrounds.
We still have wooden playgrounds, all right. And then another question that I had was in the discussion about the, there's Andrew. Chief, you're on the line now. And that was when we talked about the need for additional fire stations and adding staff for them. You had a great statistic about the number of calls for service for the paramedics. And I think that that's really important in telling the story here because, and I would like to see it both in absolute numbers of the last 10 years and then also in per capita numbers. Because I just remember that presentation you gave and it was jaw-dropping. And so I don't, I wish that could be part of the discussion tonight. Do you have those at your fingertips?
I have it on the screen right now. I'm prepared
Okay.
for you, Councilman Jackson. We have, I don't know specifically what you were referring to for what the exact data that we were talking about, but just in total calls, in 2014, we did 4,900 calls total. And of those, 2014, we did 4,915 calls. Last year, we did 7,220 calls. This year to date, we've done 5,197. And then I think kind of probably one of the areas that was important to you was the total kind of EMS versus fire calls of those years. And so we roughly, of those 7,000 calls last year, about 77 or 78% of those are EMS related calls. And so we talk a lot about the demand for emergency response and the demand on EMS services, especially as healthcare systems are bogged up. And that's why probably politically you've heard a lot of different discussions around the ambulance services throughout the state and the challenges that we've seen both in the statewide level and nationally. So that's a big demand and a big increase that you've seen is the reliance on ambulance response in the city.
Great, thank you. All right, let's see. In years past, and this is more of an overall budget question, but we've seen how the pie has increased. And in your Friday report, I think $253 million in building permits this year.
The valuation of what's being built.
Yes.
Yep.
And so that's $250 million bigger pie. And I think that that's important for the public to process this, that if the levy is going up 13%, the pie is also going up so that their percentage increase of their tax bill won't be anything like 13%.
No, it will be.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, sometimes the Kevin Staunton used to call it the kind of the wind chill, right? Sometimes there are times when we would increase our levy by 8%, but the impact would be 2%. Or times when we the impact would be 10 and our levy increase might be 4, right? This year, it's looking like it's pretty close, right? The levy increase is going to equate to pretty close up to a 13% impact.
And that's because a lot of the valuations are driving up for residential higher than commercial. So sometimes that formula changes as well.
Been a shift this year. A lot of that is driven by the relative growth of the CI tax base, commercial industrial tax base against residential tax base. And as the CI has dropped. You see a lot of that about towers in downtown Minneapolis. We have some of that too, and we've had, that value has been kind of stagnant for this year. But our residential numbers have gone up, but not quite as much as they have in previous years.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. And then, you know, if you think about it, department by department by department, I mean, the spending on IT has gone through the roof. I know that one of the things I've been telling people about is Edition Edina is something that we started, and I'm curious as to, we get increasing demands from the public to tell us more and communicate more, and I know that's been going on for a long time. How much has the communications department expanded its needs or its response to our need in the last 10 years?
I don't have it here. Maybe I can.
We had the IT stuff earlier.
Yeah, you had the IT, and that's just jaw-dropping.
And your staff, Ryan, your staffing though has been fairly level the last couple of years, right?
Last few years, yes, but there's, over the last 10 years, we've increased it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 100 and something percent. I did the numbers.
For staffing?
Well, the overall number, over 10 years, it's just been, and that's the modern world, I mean, but that's part of the story, so.
I have it.
Okay.
Okay, in 2014, the communications division's budget was just under $1 million at $998,357. Our actual expenses for that year were just over $1 million at $1,053,409. Our proposed budget for this year is $1.7 million, as you heard, 1% of the city's consolidated budget. Most of our budget is for personnel. Since 2014, we've gained just one part-time employee, and that's our administrative support specialist to back up the City Hall receptionist. So most of what we're doing is, writing, maintaining the website, doing the social media. The outside of personnel costs, where we've seen the biggest increases are in postage for your newsletters. And we're seeing reductions, which isn't really reflected here, in PEG fees and cable franchise fees. We've also reduced advertising. We no longer produce About Town quarterly with $25,000 in advertising in each issue, and we don't sell advertising in Edition Edina.
Okay.
Do you think that we can call off this meeting with Heritage Preservation? I mean, what time are they coming in?
Well, it's not
here.
Yeah, it's not the HPC. It's the Historical Society.
Oh, Historical Society.
Yeah.
They're here.
So that's the end of my question.
Yeah, we got no chance of having any kind of a substantive conversation about this really important issue here before we get to a council meeting, and then it's going to be a different kind of conversation. Extension of this one. Because what we've said in the past as a council is that we wanted to accomplish certain things in 2025. But you could say that the need for enhanced public safety took us a direction that we didn't expect. It made it more of an acceleration of what we thought we needed to do to keep our people and property safe. So that's 5.43%. So for me, the question becomes, what did we say that we wanted to accomplish in 2025 from a service standpoint or a capital investment standpoint that we might want to back away from and do it in 26 or 27 to try to keep the rate of increase down? Because if the point you were making, if the rate of increase at 13% doesn't turn out to be an actual increase of something less than that, we're going to be in double digits. And I don't know how many, there's independent funding sources for most of the things on this list. But you gave us a list of 1.9 million worth of projects that were related to the levy, general levy.
Correct.
And if I'm just using this sort of a wholesale conversation here, but if we said we want to decrease the bottom line levy, we can either decrease service or we can decrease capital investment or a combination of both. And so if we said, no, I'm thinking that 1.9 represents probably 4%.
3.5, 4, something like that.
That if we said we're gonna hold off putting a new park shelter building in Lewis Park, till talk about it next year. I mean, these are just things I think are important to think about. What percent of the properties in our town do you think pay $20,000 or more a year in property tax? We talk about the median price home all the time, and it's $273 a year, I think is what we're talking about on increase here. If we went to the 13%.
It's about I have that.
The increase, though, if you look at the monthly property tax, the cost of city property taxes on a monthly basis for the median single-family home goes from $177 to $200.
Yeah, it's like $23.
$23.
But you extrapolate that out, it's $200 some a year.
Yep.
If you take that same idea, take it to a house that's getting taxed at $200 or $20,000 or $30,000 a year, your taxes are going to go up $3,000 to $4,000 in 1 year. We got a lot of houses in Edina, I think. That's why I asked you the question, that are in that taxation range.
Probably would have to get back to you with that piece of information.
We use the median, though, because it is easy to scale, both scale it up and down.
What we've always said when we did the preliminary levy adoption was that this gives us time to figure out what we want to do until we get to the final levy time in December. But there's a particular stickiness to that preliminary levy number for people in our community that maybe don't realize where the number could go down. So I think it's really, tonight in particular, kind of tricky work when you get into double figures on setting the preliminary levy.
But at this point, I guess my question is, and maybe your question, like, where is there that flexibility? Because if 5.9% of the total is from those base increases, and 5.46 is because of the public safety, we're already in double digit regardless. And so what I'm adding is there's 1.8% potentially if you look across the street assessment policy change, equipment, capital increase, zoning comprehensive plan. Those three items are the only other ones that are contributing to that total.
So these are all contributing to the
On the
total.
services
There's $2 million worth of capital improvement plan projects that are contributing to the total.
So that's true on the services side, and Jim's saying.
Yeah, on the capital investment
On the
side.
CIP side is the only place.
I'm not talking about reducing
there's
service.
flexibility. Yeah. You guys are making kind of the same point. If you're not thinking about reducing services.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm thinking if there is, should we be thinking about trying to do everything we thought we wanted to do from a capital improvement standpoint? Or, I got it, I said it, Kendra. And that's the conversation I guess we'll have with my council meeting.
I do want to thank RA for sending out the unfunded projects, because I think it's really important we look at this, and yeah, it's a lot, but there's a lot that's not going to happen. And I would like to go back to the slide about on-demand maintenance. I think it's page 13.
Mm-hmm.
But as I look at what is not getting funded, fire station number 1, $1,251,082 of deferred maintenance, and I don't know what that is. Deferred maintenance. I mean, that can really, of course, we all know that can really turn out to be very expensive. And as I look at the facility condition index, I'm seeing that 0.38 citywide, 0.67 for Edinburgh, Edinburgh seems like it's in really rough shape, but I'm sure within the city, there's a range, you know, of buildings, and I feel like as a council person, I don't have enough understanding of just, you know, what the significance is of not doing some of the things, so I want to get that out there too.
I always start with, is high bad and low good?
Low is good.
Low is good.
0 is
Okay.
excellent, high
Okay.
is bad.
Okay, thank
A
you.
good barometer is 0.25.
Okay.
That's kind of a, you know, you're able to maintain your assets and the maintenance on them without major influxes of cash needed every 5 to 10 years, or without anything falling into neglect.
Okay, thank you.
What is the number for fire station number 1 as a standalone? Do you know that? or-
Not off the top of my head, but I can get it very easily for you.
Okay.
I can tell you, you know, the whatever $1 million that wasn't shown there. A big chunk of it comes back to electrical and mechanical systems, right? So we talked about this before with building age.
Yep.
That fire station is starting to reach that age where those mechanical and electrical systems have reached the end of their useful life. They're not things that are falling apart or not working anymore. It's just we're expecting them to, you know, start to reach a point where repairs no longer can extend their life. We need to replace that piece of equipment.
Okay. No, because that tour of the aquatic center and also touring Braemar was a wake-up call.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
got that in the back.
And the reason Edinburgh is so high is the construction of the building, right? So a large portion of that building is glass, skylights, clear story windows, things like that. That is, you know, $3 to $4 million of different maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
So what are we presenting then at Sept?
What are we
City
presenting?
Council related to
It's this presentation.
the one you just showed us? Okay.
There's a couple additional slides, but most of them are things you've seen a lot of times, so. Here now.
So, like, I think the story of the 11% is base, safety, fire. And the number might be different, but it's on your slide. Articulating what those cost drivers are. And then, I mean, saying we hear community, this 13%, right? It's a lot. And we have work to do to see if there's a way we can lower that by looking at our CIP projects. We really don't want to compromise quality in those areas. I like the way you teed up the fact that a lot of this is feedback from the residents. Like, I think we have to tee it up that way tonight. The last thing I want, and I mentioned this to you this morning, I don't want to go into a public hearing when we're just going to hear people say it's too high. And so we've gone a long way in at least being able to articulate what those cost drivers are so people can at least internalize some of that information. The better we can do that, the more we can do that, I think the better. So I like those additions. But that's kind of what's in my head. We're not going to be able to figure out which one of those things to pull off. I don't think.
I think the point you're making is that a good thorough discussion of how we got to setting the preliminary levy tonight and the work ahead to figure out what we're going to be recommending or what the final levy will be is going to involve a significant amount of work and input from residents. But we've given ourselves the flexibility by using the staff-driven number.
Can I throw one more thing in there? Not for tonight, but to go back to Member Jackson's question on is this 13%? And you gave you went into commercial versus property. So the $9 million projection. So the big question I have, I think we have to forecast, and maybe we do this, our revenue and the revenue model across all of that. And so, like, we need to be getting some insight into, well, if it's 9 million and we're still at 90% residential, whatever the number is, well, what does that mean in our community if we have to absorb that kind of an increase in 20, whatever the year was? To start thinking about, does our revenue model, we may need to start shifting our revenue model now, meaning adding more businesses or what have you. And we can't wait till 2028 to be doing that. So I think really doing that kind of forecast now will start to give us some kind of insight.
That is really one of the fundamental advantages we have as a city government, is that our assessing department will tell us what our tax base is going to be a year ahead of time, right? So we've got a really solid forecast. Now, there'll be a little bit of, there'll be some taxpayers, mostly on the commercial side, that will want to appeal, and they're going to court. And actually, our assessing team's been in court yesterday and today. That's why they're not here tonight. But they can tell us with a pretty high degree of certainty which way our tax base is going, not only which way our tax base is going, but which way the components of our tax base are going.
So am I here? You say we have that?
We do.
Okay.
Yep. I don't know if you have it.
I don't think
where
I
you're
have
sitting, but
I don't have it where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
Show it now.
I have it.
To the mayor's point though, and I think this came up during our, our little getaway or whatever. Retreat, thank you. Words just don't come. Concern about not having enough time to talk about the CIP. I believe that came up. And I think, we need to bake in more time for that. And I don't know what the answer is, if it's having an additional meeting between that initial one in August and then another one and then this one. But I think all of us, I also feel like we don't have enough time tonight to do it justice. So.
The CIP doesn't have the same kind of statutory deadlines that our preliminary tax levy has. Okay. So we can continue to discuss the CIP throughout the fall and not run into a deadline until December.
Right. And I know they're interconnected, but it's frustrating.
I think if we would have had another month or to work with, it would have been helpful.
It would have been.
Although, once you set the preliminary levy and then go to work in the gap period until we get to the early December, that should be sufficient time to get some ideas out there and show some options.
So James, this is what I was talking about. This is the market value projections for, and these aren't just, I will say these aren't projections, these are actual numbers. And one of the things you can see happening in 2024 on the commercial side is an actual decrease in our CI tax base from 2.38 billion to 2.35 billion. You can see the increase. You can see the increase on the residential side from 12.5 billion to 13 billion. But that's an interesting event because it hasn't happened very often during that time frame. And then the tax capacity follows the market value.
So it's interesting to think that in the last, probably since 2009, we've doubled the market value of the property in our town to create that bigger base that Carolyn's talking about. But we're still looking at a 13% tax increase. Yeah. So between the demand for service and capital improvements, we're doing a lot. All right, we'll move to another topic.
Historical Society?
Historical Society.
Thank you.
Just need no down.
We could have kicked it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Action shot.
Where's she playing at? What park?
McCarthy? Is that a park? McCarthy Field.
Yeah.
I think it's by Concord.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council. This evening is a follow-up conversation related to a discussion we had earlier this spring in February related to the Edina Historical Society's request related to their board and their function. This evening, Sarah Solvig is here. She's the president of the Edina Historical Society Board. And we are going to just jump right in because I know we don't have a whole lot of time. But just as a recap, I always joke, if it's been longer than 30 days, we will remind you. The Edina Historical Society was established in 1969 as a 501c3. They were formed by the city and the residents to save the historical Cahill School and buildings, and then also to provide historical related programs. Their mission is to collect, preserve, and tell the Edina story. And they operate out of Arneson Acres Park, and they do additional programmings at the Cahill School and the Grange Building. Just as a little bit of recap on the background, the city provides $20,000 annually in their operating funding. The society is eligible for and has received legacy grants from the state of Minnesota Historical Society. So just as a clarifying fact, those legacy grants, the eligibility is often a little bit stringent. So for example, the city of Edina could not apply for and receive those grants, but because the Historical Society is a 501c3, they have a different eligibility for some of those. They provide the following services. They archive records and materials that would otherwise be eliminated with the Minnesota Data Practices Act. They do cataloging and preserve acquisitions. They do exhibits, they bring in speakers, and they provide research materials for the general public. So as a reminder, at that time, we looked at kind of a three-tiered option. One is kind of the status quo. I don't think anyone was excited about that. There was discussion around the city absorbing the Edina Historical Society or increasing financial support to retain them as a viable organization in the community. So just a recap of the specifics of the request. It was to continue to grant the $20,000 annually to the Historical Society in this fiscal year. That has occurred. It was to levy an additional $80,000 starting in fiscal year 2025 for a total of $100,000 continuing through fiscal year 2027. Some of those pros, it would defer any type of a merger or worry about that for at least 3 years. It allows time for us to conduct an operational evaluation. An improved funding would stabilize with a executive director position, should improve their service levels related to hours open and access. There would be potential for amending bylaws, improving board membership, continue to retain the ability to seek grants. That was one big thing. And then reduces a little bit of concern that the city would have to maintain and document that collection. Some of those concerns at the time were disincentivize money-raising initiatives, donations, memberships, may lead to an expectation of annual increases, and requires that one-time increase in fiscal year 2025. So the Edina Historical Society Board listened to you. That work session, they looked at the minutes, they listened to the recording, they captured your discussion about what that takeaway was, and the board went off and did I don't know if it was a retreat exactly, but spent a lot of time working through and submitted a strategy and operational plan. We did include that in your packet this evening of that submission. That included just a recap of their vision and mission, but then what strategy would they use to implement that? What would their operating plan look like? How they would evaluate and monitor on those key measures? They performed a situational analysis, so strengths, weakness, threats and opportunities exercise, and they also included a 3-year budget projection as well, so that pro forma. So I will turn it over to the council for questions. I did want to just highlight that Don Urim did a lot of work on this process as well during his I don't know, tenure, intermediate tenure, part-time tenure, however we describe that, as well as Nicole Gorman. And Nicole Gorman is a recreation supervisor in Parks and Recreation. So she's also our liaison and attends the Historical Society board members. So I had the opportunity to provide this presentation tonight, although they're the two that have been doing all the work on behind the scenes.
Right, yeah, questions, yeah. Councilor.
So I'm curious about the line between us taking over and it continuing to be maintained as a nonprofit. Is there a certain funding level in which that happens, or how do we ensure that we're not taking it over?
I would say from the staff perspective, that's kind of why we're in the favor of the increased financial support, because it really would be as soon as the Historical Society would look at their reserves, their balances, and find out that they cannot continue as an organization. And I believe that's kind of why the urgency is to get an answer yet this year on what direction they would be to prevent that.
Well, and I'm even meaning from like the state's eyes. Like if we were to give the Historical Society $1 million a year, does that risk their eligibility to be a 501(c)(3)? Thank you.
As far as grants are concerned, that may be a consideration that the state would look at, is what kind of other stipends are you getting? There is a state statute related to how much a city can give to a historical society, and that is quite a large amount. It's based off of, I'm not sure if they still call it a mill rate for those that know what a mill rate is, but there's a certain percentage of your estimated market value is a maximum a city can give to a historical society by state statute, and we are well under that. So there wouldn't be any concerns related to this amount of a stipend, either making them ineligible for grants or violating state statute, if that helps answer your question.
That answers my question. Thank you.
I actually met with our new DEI with Thomas, and we talked about things that I was concerned about. And I did bring up the Edina Historical Society and specifically the signage at Tupa Park, which is so limited. And it actually, when I read the statement that since its founding in 1969, the society has sought to secure, preserve, and share items relating to its earliest settlers, this little, it is a society primarily about settler heritage. And I think because of that, we end up with a situation where we have what we have. So we have the Cahill School, which was there for the Irish immigrant community from Cahill on land that historically was not about Irish settlers so much as Black farmers, Black educators. And so where my biggest concern exists is really high level, the vision and the focus of the Historical Society. And I was thinking, and when I brought it up, one of the ideas that kind of percolated was it would be, or it makes sense, to have one or two of our commissions look at this and try to figure out in terms of, what the Historical Society is going to encompass, or could that scope be bigger so that it could be more inclusive and not, and then as I look down this document, one of the big challenges is that there's disinterest, public disinterest in pioneer history. Well, it doesn't have to just only be pioneer history. And then so I'm a little reticent, especially since I also just finished looking at all the things that we're not gonna fund, and 80,000 could get night vision goggles for the police. It just is hard for me to, at this juncture, ramp up funding without knowing that there's gonna be a concerted effort to broaden the scope. I'm also concerned that we've had a series of executive directors that have come from the exact same source, the small department, you know, over at the University of St. Thomas. And so I kind of feel like we're getting the same sort of vision. And those are my concerns with this. But, you know, could we pause it and have our commission look at it? Would a year delay be a big deal?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Risser. So I can't answer all those questions, but I will start and reflect, and if you want to entertain comments from the president of the organization, that is possible too. But I would agree. I think when we looked at the submitted strategy and operations plan, and don't have it verbatim, but it is, there is that relation to maybe fatigue related to pioneer history.
Yeah.
Also, I do know in their strategy plan was the reflection on indigenous population prior to colonization. And that was also in there about an opportunity for the Historical Society. And just to clarify, so the signs at Tupa Park are city-owned, not Historical Society-owned. So I know we've had attempts to try to work on those, but again, about who does that, who leads that. So that would be a city initiative to update those as well.
Okay, so that is good to know. So we
own those signs. We've made some edits to them because there were some glaring items of inaccuracies.
We misspelled Yancey, yeah.
Yeah, so there were some glaring items in there, but those are just to clarify, those are not the Historical Society's signs.
But so content would come from the city staff and not the historical?
To date, the Historical Society has provided us with that copy.
Okay.
Sarah worked on them most recently with me in 2020?
2021, something like that, yeah.
It's just, it's hard to go over and look at those signs. You know, and you think about Ellen Yancey, who started a PTA, and she's not there. You know, and it just is challenging.
And to the other question about a year's delay, I think that would impact this Historical Society's long-term viability.
But if we don't put, okay, but then see, I just feel like if we go ahead and just grant more money, we're gonna keep seeing the same thing, and we're not gonna get a broader scope. We're not gonna get signage that's inclusive. We're gonna keep getting the same kind of vision.
Yeah, I thought it had a pretty broad scope.
Does it?
When I think about maybe what the mission hasn't aligned with their actual work necessarily, but they've had exhibitions on Southdale Mall. They've had exhibitions on the first hockey team that won the state hockey championship, the history of hockey in Edina. So I know the things that I've been over there to look at that they've worked on don't just cover that pioneer period. They come all the way forward.
And again, I don't want to speak for the society, but I think when there's a reflection upon there's an opportunity to tell the indigenous story, I think that does take initiative and time to then go tell that story and pull that together. And I think where the board struggles right now is on their identity related to working board, oversight board, volunteer board, and who can actually help them do that work. I think as part of this, if there are items that you would say, try to negotiate into an agreement, you know, that to reflect upon that, it might be would city staff participate in the interviews to help on the selection. One thing I notice in working with our commissions is student commissioners have a tremendous amount of effort and assistance. You know, the ones that you're appointing to all of those, they like to roll up their sleeves and work, right? And I think a lot of times pulling off an event and a speaker does take work. So is there an opportunity to say, related to try to negotiate for governance, to say, you know, our appointment of student commissioner is important to help them relay that variety of story and also help on the work delivery as well.
And I don't, maybe with that, because I know you also did a exhibit on yearbooks. And was the Wendigo native deity addressed in that? Or was Wendigo not even, because we used that Anishinaabe spirit for the name of our yearbook.
That, I do not believe that that was included.
So it's not only, it's contemporary and relatively recent. So it's not just finding a native topic and putting money towards it, but it's also viewing topics that are being covered in a way that's inclusive to.
So I have a different question. I read this as the Historical Society sees the opportunity, if they can get some stability, to start having programs that will generate revenue. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, is that we're looking at this as a big opportunity for us to make some of the changes that have been needed for probably longer than I've been involved in the board of directors. So we really are looking at this, okay, what can we do if we are able to get this funding to make us more relevant to the community, to address the needs and the current interests of the community, and also kind of doing the right thing with addressing the Native American settlement here prior to pioneers, to address the Yancey family and all the black settlers who really had a strong impact on our community as well. And we had our board meeting last night, and we were talking we have an interim executive director right now, and she's putting together plans to kind of revamp our existing permanent exhibit, which, if anybody has been there in the past couple of years, you can see that it's truly showing its age. And in the new exhibit, it would address a little bit more of our history beyond settlement.
So, follow up on Member Risser's questions. And actually I'll address this to you, Julie. Are you suggesting that the city money would come with requirements to work with our DEI director to help ensure that happens in the thing? So come with strings attached. I couldn't think of the phrase. So that the money would come with some strings attached to address our values viewfinder, for example. That we have a tool in place to help do that. And is that kind of what you're suggesting?
I hadn't gotten that far, but I appreciate you saying that. I think it's a really good idea.
I would suggest that.
And also, I think that really should be part of it. Expanding the scope and being.
Well, just put some strings attached to the money. Yeah.
Possibly spots on the board.
But I think it is true, after the analysis you've gone through, that if we don't do something, subsume them into the Park and Rec department in some form or fashion, or let them stand the way they are and help fund them for a while until they get up and going.
Or HR, police, right?
But it will cease to exist. So if we think it's important, we got to close.
Correct, Mayor. I think that's our concern basically is trying to ensure vitality, because that first phase of just what do we do with a collection that we're required to get rid of things after 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, that is part of Edina's history, that the reason the Historical Society wants to keep them is they provide value to the community long term. And if we step in, and Sharon has taught us well, we might need to get rid of some things that are older than 10 years, and that's a lot of history. So I think it's about that vitality and in trying to ensure success for people that want to specialize and give back in this community.
And you're only proposing to do it through 27, correct? And then there'll be some sort of period, just like when we have the Human Services Task Force, where there'd be an opportunity to reflect on whatever that progress has been made or expectations.
And that was part of what the Historical Society put together was opportunities for measurement. And that was the ability to start getting in these things. And then what, as the conversation we had with them is, your first idea might be just, here are the things we want to measure. We don't know what the measurement will be, what the correct capacity or attendance or visits might be, but we want to start actually measuring. So getting those metrics in place is part of this.
So I think for me, I don't know that if you were to ask me, is it worth $100,000 right now, that I could say yes. But I am willing to do this for 2 or 3 years and build out what some of those metrics are and really make that analysis. And I was going back to kind of the vision statement that's in here and some of the mission components, but fostering a strong sense of community knowledge and pride. Let's compare the ROI. Like, is there any other way that we can foster that sense of community knowledge and pride for $100,000 that might be more beneficial? But that's kind of the angle that I would want to take on the data. But I think at this point, I'm comfortable with just a couple of years.
One other quick idea, if funding is going to sunset, that's a good fundraiser. We're going to lose our funding, you got to give us money, seriously.
Thanks.
Okay.
So again, we're not asking for a decision tonight, but just more, is there a general direction? And I think what we're, just to summarize a little bit, is continue to proceed down that path, look at some of the agreements or things that we can build into what would be a long-term service contract, long-term meaning for the 3 years, service contract for the city, and we're so excited to work together.
Yeah, for me, member Edina said, well, I'm with her, I came.
Thanks for the hard work you've done on this.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity
Yeah,
to just present this today, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And to Greg Good. And to Greg Good, right?
Oh, yeah, if you know Greg,
So
yes.
you had to come on the heels of the CIP this time.
So, yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Please stand adjourned.